Hello and welcome to Stockyard Sessions, brought to you by Atlas Ag, the team behind Atlas Carbon and Atlas Grazing. I'm your host, Victoria Lawrance, and a proud member of the Atlas Ag team. This podcast is about going back to the beginning, the soil, the decisions, and the people who aren't afraid to rethink how things have always been done. My guest today is someone who's quietly been doing the hard work of figuring out how to make a grazing business both productive and regenerative in one of the most challenging environments in the country. Andrew Mosely runs Etiwanda Station near Cobar, New South Wales, where his family has been for generations. But when he stepped into the business in the late 90s, things weren't exactly set up for success. Like a lot of producers at the time, he was dealing with tough economics, a changing industry, and a landscape that needed a different approach. Alongside his wife Megan and their two daughters, Emily and Jess, Andrew has spent decades reshaping how they manage land, livestock, and the realities of running a family operation in a variable climate. What followed wasn't a quick fix. It was a long process of trial, error, and rethinking how grazing could work. Today, that journey has led to a system that's more diverse, resilient, and more in tune with the land itself. Andrew, welcome to Stockyard Sessions.
Thanks, Victoria.
So for those who haven't come across Etiwanda before, how would you describe the property and what it means to you?
So Etiwanda's in the Western Division of New South Wales, not far from the centre of New South Wales. It's in an area that sometimes people will look down their nose at you and say, well, why do you live out there? It can be a pretty challenging environment. It's red, sandy loam country, a lot of timber and scrub on it. Yeah, so it has its challenges.
Yeah, so I guess with the challenges, what's the season looking like out there at the moment?
It's not too bad. We're not too bad. Had some rain through February, early March, which has given us some water. We were getting very low. Water was becoming critical. And we're growing feed where we've got country that's in a state ready to respond. So, yeah, we'll get into that later. It's a pretty interesting time of the year to see the response and non-response, from the same rainfall events.
Yeah, for sure. Keen to chat to you about that. But tell me about the family history. I mean, your family has been there for a long time. How did that all evolve?
Yeah, so our story began in 1949 when my grandfather drew a soldier settlers block south of Cobar. It's a 25,000 acre block that many describe those soldier settled blocks as starvation blocks, just so too small to make a living off. But that's how he got his start. He'd been in the West, working in the West, further west around Louth, and that's how he got his taste for the land. And when the opportunity came up, he put his name in the hat and ended up drawing Manuka.
Amazing.
So, 1949, and then he only lived for 4 years, so he didn't really get to experience it. And Dad was away at boarding school, so Dad was only 12. Yeah, so my grandmother had to keep it going until Dad finished school and came home to give her a hand. And then Mum and Dad, built it up to the 70,000 acres that Megan and I came home to in the late 90s.
Yeah. Did you always imagine coming back to the place? And what was it like when you did take over at that time?
Yeah, I couldn't wait to get home. They made me I had to go. I went to university and then I went and got a job and found Megan. So
So it was worth it.
Yeah. I don't think I would have found anyone out here. No, but I couldn't wait to get home. I would have come straight home. I had boarding school every holiday. I was home, helping and mustering and chasing goats, and I just couldn't wait to get stuck into it.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you then if you thought of it more of an opportunity or weight of responsibility, maybe a bit of both.
At that stage, it was just an opportunity. I wasn't aware of all the challenges and.
Did you see it through rose-coloured glasses a little bit?
Looking back, it was pretty naive, really, but I wouldn't change any of it. It's been fantastic. The journey so far, I learned heaps, been challenged, grateful for that challenge. So, I wouldn't change any of it.
So when you did come back and you started to really understand the landscape that you were then going to manage, what first led you to question the way things were being done?
Yeah, so we came home in the late 90s. The 90s were a bit of a turning point in this district. Following the collapse of the reserve price screen for wool growing in this area was unviable. It's not a good wool growing area anyway, so the scrub and the spear grass, so you get high VM content. We also had a sort of a shift in the seasonal rainfall patterns. We were getting more summer rain, heavy rainfall events in those sort of periods. So lots of runoff. We weren't growing grass. people were complaining about the scrub encroachment, blaming the scrub for the lack of grass growth. And I was just keen to learn more and understand what was actually going on. And it wasn't until I was given Alan Savory's first book on holistic management that started to offer up some answers to what was going on. And we soon realised that it was the health of the soil that was the real issue, not the woody weeds. The woody weeds were just a response to previous management, environmental effects, whether they were seasons or rabbits and overgrazing and changing fire regimes, all those things that people know about. Yeah, so the soil had become hard and it had a hard cap on it. So the water was just running off, and we were dependent on with annuals for any sort of livestock production, which is a boom bust scenario, given that we can get rain any time of the year.
So you said Alan Savory's book was sort of your introduction to focusing on the grazing management side of things. What drew you to pick that book up, and what sort of did you take away from that?
So, Mum and Dad went to a Grazing for Profit information day and heard about it, and Mum gave me the book, and I read it and reread it, tried to get my head around it. Still haven't really got my head around it, but we know a little bit more. Like I said, it started off offer up some answers in terms of the need for periodic disturbance and rest in these semi-arid, brittle environments. Yeah, so I guess that was the first bit of the puzzle that was we had to think about. At that stage, we got involved with the bull goat when they were first brought to Australia. So they set up a quarantine station down in South Australia. So I got involved with that and had animals down there in the quarantine station, and then brought goats home with us. And so we started fencing to run goats with better fencing. And so we'd rest country following rainfall events just to see what would happen. And because of those better fences that you need a good fences to be able to manage goats, we could see what the country was starting to do, and when it was allowed to do its thing. There weren't animals always chipping away at the young plants as they were trying to get established and grow. So we saw that response very early.
So that's sort of where you started to see things click when you implemented that. Was there anything that you tried early that didn't work?
Yeah, well, part of that process of fencing to run goats is it was obviously a capital expense, and so you typically do one paddock at a time, and then so it used to get pushed a bit too hard because the limited number of paddocks. We were limited to what we could, how we could manage, or what in terms of how much rest we could. Starting over again, and it's you got to work with what you've got. So unless you've got millions of dollars behind you, you can't rush out and throw it at the farm and get to where you want to. So you've got to make it. We've had to make it pay as we go. Work with what you've got. So
coming back to that response that you started to see when you were putting in that fencing development, what did that look like? How could you tell that was heading in the right direction? So the first thing was we'd grow more. A bigger bulk of food from the species that were there. And they were pretty low succession type species, so your annuals and your stipers and the stipe, like your spear grass and your white grass, they're very low succession, low quality grasses. So at least we were growing more of them. And then as we started to move along our understanding, we started to see those better perennial grasses, the softer seeded, better quality perennials start to come in, and that's just really snowballed now. So they were coming in on their own. There wasn't any reseeding that you were doing. No reseeding, but we were doing some opportunity cropping. So we were doing some mechanical disturbance, and we found where we direct drilled oats in and kept the oat stubble cover. If you got that November, December rain, you got a fantastic germination of these soft seeded native perennials. And they were, in the rows. So when we started out, we were so pleased to see these grasses that we hadn't seen for before, that we were too soft on them, and we lost them through over rest. So that was a learning process as well. Yeah, it's usually the other way around. Everyone goes a bit too hard and gets excited and eats too much. We should have gone a bit harder. I think we suffered from that mentality that it's fragile. You can't touch it. You got to be careful. It is fragile country, but it just needs the right management, and it responds. So in saying that, I mean, you've more than doubled your carrying capacity on the place, but I'm keen to get your perspective on what you think truly drove that. Was it one factor? Was it a combination of many things? What's your understanding of that?
Yeah, you got to look from the big picture. So it's the combination of livestock enterprises. It's the fencing. We now have got over 90 paddocks on 50,000 acres. And it's also the mechanical. So we're treating that invasive native scrub that's moved in, that had moved in from past management practices. So and that speeds it up. But you need the grazing management. You need the good fencing there to be able to rest country and look after it. So when your perennials, especially we've just been through, when you get those tough times, you need to be able to rest it. Also, you need to be able to set the plant up ready to respond to when the rain does come. And then when it comes, you've got to let it do its thing. If you've got animals there scattered all over the place all the time, it never gets a chance to build a root reserve, and it never gets a chance to grow that biomass. So just for example, in this recent rainfall event, we've grown cattle feed on our country, and then there's properties around us that are struggling to grow a sheep pick. So that's just because we've got the perennials there set up, ready to fire, and they fired. So
I suppose your understanding and probably approach to rest and recovery would have evolved a lot, particularly if you've done experiments of, usually a lot of producers, we go too hard, but you were just saying before that maybe you didn't go hard enough. So what's formed your strategy around rest and recovery?
So in these brittle semi-arid environments, it's seasonally dry. So we're always going to have dry periods. We don't have a green period for all the year. So our growing period might be 3 months to 6 months. In those better years, it might be up to 9 or 10 months. But that's their exceptional years. But so that your average year, you'll grow 5 or 6 months where you've got green. So you've got to try and grow as much food as you can to get you through that dry period, that non-growing period. And in that non-growing period, so you've got to budget your feed out to get through that, and probably have a bit up your sleeve. But you also need to cycle that carbon, that old material on the top of the perennial grasses, so that they're ready to respond when you get more rain. And I didn't really fully understand that until we probably just recently, we've seen, like we had really some good seasons, 20, 21, 22. We grow, a huge bulk of food. But at the end of that, we were trying to cycle that carbon, remove the top out so that the crown or the base of the plant was ready to fire once you got the conditions for it to grow again. I guess that's the trick. Whereas, and other comment I was going to make was about, I think anybody can graze country, whether you set stock conservatively or you set stock, you push your stocking rates, or whether you rotate. I think we really need to be focused on our rest and recovery strategies. And because every property is different, every operation is different, there's no set formula. We work on trying to get up, 180 days recovery, because we reckon that'll get us through to the next growing period. But also that's the highly likely you've had some rain to stimulate the plant to start to regrow. So that's how we try and think. We're not just running one mob around that 50,000 acres, so it's a lot more complicated than set and forget and do one plan. So we're looking at country, forecasting how much feed's in front of us, looking at country that needs longer periods to recover, and trying to juggle those things and trying to keep the cash flowing and get the bank manager happy. Like I said, the place has got to pay for all this. It's financing it. So there's all those things to juggle, and then there's the people who look after the people. So that's why they talk about holistic context. It's your land, your livestock, your finances, and your people.
Yeah, it is a big juggling act all at once. So if we switch our attention to more of the business side of it, with the land functioning so differently today, how does that influence the way that you do run the business?
Yeah, I'll probably just take a step back. After 2002, major drought in Australia, and at that stage we were still running mainly merinos and just starting with the goats. We've been harvesting goats and we'd started to fence a bit of country, but then we were in serious trouble after the 2002 drought. We'd lost a lot of sheep, and we had to make some drastic changes if we were going to survive financially. That was one of the big challenges, that we actually redesigned the business after that, focusing on cash flow, how we start to restore and move the landscape forward again. So fencing was a key part of it. And we also got involved with the White Dorpers when they were just coming to Australia, and they've been a fantastic opportunity for us. And the shedding sheep have really taken off in Australia. We're the first people in the Dorper game. So that was another way we could generate some cash and to start to rebuild. So we set out the Dorpers were going to be our centrepiece operation. We breed rams, so it was our centrepiece operation. Then we'd have the White Dorper commercial operation and the goats. And we're running a few cows. And through that training, we realised that the cows were necessary part of the model, just to be able to create that disturbance because they're bigger and they've got bigger hooves and they can handle the bulk of the feed. And the goats were also a tool that we could use they could browse. So when we were getting started, limited feed available, we could still run, goats and generate income because they were browsing, and then we could use them. We could hit an area hard for a short period of time to start to open it up and get it moving. So the initial thought was that, Dorpers were probably 30 to 40%, and then goats were the other 30 to 40%, and cows were 20% of the numbers and of the operation. That was early 2000. So now they're probably a third each. So the cow numbers have increased because the country's improved. We can run that number of cows. We would have struggled to run 100 cows when we started out. We bought some more country and we're now running 450, 500 cows. So part of that's the new block, but we did have 300 cows on the old block before we got this new block. So that just highlights how the country's changed. We couldn't have hoped to have carried that number of cows when we first come home.
I guess that mix of enterprise seems very deliberate. And are you still in the testing phase, do you think, of this new balance of enterprise between sheep, cattle and goats, or do you see this as an ever evolving and changing mix depending on season and landscape?
No, we're pretty comfortable. We do trade cattle in those better seasons to build, give us that buffer in numbers. We do need probably 10,000 DSE buffer that we can build up and down based on the feed available. But no, we're pretty comfortable with this mix now. I think it's working really well and gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of animals that we turn up, which animals we sell, or whether we use some animals to as a landscaping tool. Yeah, so no, it's working really well. It does complicate it. We do run, sometimes we run them all together. Other times we've got them split off doing their things. So that makes the planning side of it a bit more complicated. But the three enterprises has been part of that, being able to run more DCs.
Goats seem to play a particular role within the system. How do they complement the other livestock?
Yeah, so I grew up mustering goats on a motorbike with dogs. So they've always been in the area, but their numbers exploded in the 90s with the INS encroachment. So their habitat or the areas they could live in expanded. So, yeah, rather than trying to eradicate them, we chose to farm them, and they've been a really good part of the mix. Like I said, they're a wonderful landscaping tool. We can hit some of the scrub species a bit harder and start to open country up. So they really complement the sheep and the cattle. We can run a percentage of goats without affecting the carrying capacity of the sheep or the cattle because of that browse. It's about diversity. If you want diversity in your landscape, you need a diversity of practices. You need to be able to mix up your grazing or your rest and recovery periods, and then your grazing length, like how hard you hit the country or whether you do it lightly. So goats are a wonderful tool in that mix. And something else we sort of, like our game is breeding. We breed rams to sell to other people, but we got into the Dorpers because we had spear grass country and we needed sheep that weren't going to die from grass seed infestation. But something that we're sort of learning as we go along is that the role of epigenetics. So animals that are bred in their home environment, they evolve through gene sequences that we don't really fully understand, but genes get switched on and off. And I think the fact that we've got breeding animals that are resilient, able to perform on less than ideal conditions has been a big part of what we've been able to achieve. So, and that's evolving, and that's cumulative. That just adds to its compounding. So we should make further progress in the livestock as we progress and select under our conditions. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So I guess when you're looking at that system as a whole, what are the biggest levers for profit and productivity within that?
It's rainfall utilisation, I think. When you get rain, make sure you grow something out of it. We've done this on this last rainfall event, and we've got food that will get us through the winter. But to do that, you need good fencing, good perimeter fencing. and then you need subdivision fencing and you need water to be able to break your paddocks up into smaller paddocks. So, like I said, we've got over 90 paddocks, like 50,000 acres. On the new block we've just started, we've only got half a dozen paddocks and limited water, so we've got to work with what we've got, but we've got it enclosed beyond that exclusion fence now, which means we can at least rest country and start to process, and then we'll, as the cash flow allows, we'll subdivide it.
Yeah, let's talk about exclusion fencing for a second. Obviously, that's been pretty vital to you and where you are. Would you say that was an easy decision to make, or do you have any thoughts about how valuable it has been?
Yeah, no, looking back, it's if you haven't got it, I won't say you're buggered, but you're fighting an uphill battle. We started out probably trying to make do a bit with the fence, with the bare minimum sort of to manage goats. Yeah, if we had the capital and our time again, we'd probably get a good perimeter fence in as soon as you can. And we've been lucky. The new block, where that was one of the attractions. It had an exclusion fence on one side. The one on another side was completed just as we were taking over. And we've done the other side to enclose it. So we were lucky and fortunate in that respect that we could handle it financially. And it's a game changer, I reckon. That's how I see it.
So how does that play into your thoughts of efficiency and how that's changed over time for you? I suppose probably capital and what you invest your money in plays a part in deciding what makes things more efficient?
It's more efficient. Well, it is, because we've got laneways and more paddocks, and we're not having to go out and muster 10,000 acres and trying to get them back to the yard all in sort of 1 or 2 days. So it's more efficient from that point of view. But I had a colleague that we've known for a long time that he's on inside country, and he said to my daughter that we've always thought we were a low input operation, and we don't throw a heap of inputs at our country or our livestock. But we do spend a lot of money on infrastructure, so fencing and water and training and decision making. So when you look at that light, we are a high input operation for our part of the world, which is a different way of looking at it. But if we don't do that, our operation wouldn't be anything like it is.
Yeah, okay. Let's shift a little bit and start talking about your systems and how technology and data fit into that. You've clearly spent a lot of time thinking about it. Talk me through some of the tech that you're using on the place.
Yeah, thinking about it. Having hit a few roadblocks trying to scale the operation, going from a one-man band to like you say, operation with systems and procedures in place. The girls are going to, helping with that, bringing systems and procedures in place. But we've used Myer grazing since nearly its inception, so that we can see what's going on, and that's we can see our grazing yield, so we can see what the country's doing, which gives you confidence. We've got water monitors in place now, which is a big time saver and a peace of mind. You're confident that the water's right.
So where do you draw that line between gut feel and measurement?
There's a lot of intuition still, but it needs to be backed up by data and results. So that's where something like Myer grazing comes into its own. We can see what paddocks are yielding. That makes it a bit more objective. So it's not just purely gut feel. I think a lot of farmers like to think that that they'll get done out of a job, and if they have take on technology or different ways of doing things. And then a lot of farmers got pride in what they do and how they do it and what they know. So I see it more as just providing objective information that you can take to whether it's your banks or other people to back up your story.
So I know you've been with using Myer for a very long time, one of our first customers, and now we're switching to Atlas grazing. I guess when you're looking at new technology and the water monitors is probably more recent in your memory, how do you decide what's worth adopting?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to spend money on ag tech. For me, it's either got to save you time or generate, like you say, efficiencies or extra, allows you to do more. That's how I look at it. It's got to save me time, make my job easier. You can spend a lot of time in the office just keeping your ag tech up to date, and if it's not generating useful information or saving you time, well, you're better off without it. So for me, it's got to be a return on investment in terms of capital outlay or labour efficiencies.
So you've been part of conversations around carbon and natural capital and now running a soil carbon project on the property. How do you see that space at the moment, Andrew?
So just to clarify, the soil carbon project's on the new place we bought when we purchased it a couple of years ago. We've always been interested in that idea of soil carbon. I think it's a very powerful concept. There's challenges around measurement and the cost of it. But I think if it's structured right, it's a wonderful tool to get people to move forward, because all these wonderful regen ideas, or you need capital to make land management decisions and to do things. So if you can generate, some soil carbon units that can generate some extra income, or that can speed up that move forward and give people a reason to change their practices from what they're doing. We were frustrated that we'd made a lot of improvement at Etiwanda, and we were effectively locked out of a soil carbon project because it's, you've got to document additionality in terms of, change practice or whatever. That was a big attraction of this place we wanted to do, how we're going to do it, what we're going to do. So we were fortunate we could put a carbon project in place at the same time, and if we can make substantial improvements, well, then we'll be rewarded down the track for it.
So with the soil carbon project on the new property, how has the implementation of that influenced the way you run the property and approach to grazing, or are you really taking the lessons that you've learnt at Etiwanda and applying it to this new block?
Yeah, that's all we're doing. We know what we want to do. We had a plan in place, and we just happened to, we're lucky we're talking to the crew that they knew us and they knew we'd bought this block, and they sort of suggested it. So it was quite an opportune outcome. But we knew what we're going to do it anyway. If we can put the baseline in place and prove that we can lift our soil carbon levels in these semi-arid environments, we can get paid for it.
How do you stay focused on the core business while all this is evolving? I think the idea out there that carbon is a bit of a distraction is prevalent, and I guess that the beauty of the soil carbon projects within the grazing system is it is really about productivity and lifting productivity on the property, and then earning, like you said, a bonus with carbon credits. Do you find it a distraction, or is it easy to stay focused on core business, or what are your thoughts around that?
It's getting harder to stay focused because the operation's grown so much from what we were 20 years ago. But building carbon, it's a no-brainer really, because it does builds productivity, but also builds resilience. So more carbon in your soil will store water and nutrients, so that they'll get you through those challenging periods. For us, it's a no-brainer. Like, it's just a lot of variables, and so there's conflict in the community about whether you can do it or whether you can't do it, and what practices do it. And there's so much variation in the soil and the landscape that's complicates the picture. But if you look at the principles, we just got to find out how to make it happen, and then make it happen. The evidence is there that if you've got more carbon, you will store more moisture and minerals. So that's a good outcome. It's just understanding the variables and getting our heads around that, I think.
Yeah, I think you're living proof of the principles in play are exactly that, are building all of the soil carbon, the water holding capacity, the micronutrients, the nutrient profile, everything is building within the soil as you manage the grass well. And it's just an opportunity for people to be able to earn some extra revenue on top of that. But stepping back from all of that, when you look back, what are you most proud of at Etiwanda?
Oh, it's the change in the landscape. When you tell people you're from Cobar, they sort of look down your nose at you and think, what the hell are you doing? But driving around now, we've got, grass, 6, 8 inches high, it's green, and like I said, we've got cattle feed, and we never had that when we first came home. Even in our, we just didn't have it, even some of the, the better areas. So that's what I'm most proud of,
And I know you were talking about the drought that made you reevaluate the business as a whole and your grazing strategy. Has that been the hardest period that people might not see, and what's kept you going through those tougher times?
That was certainly one of them. There's been plenty of challenges thrown at us over the 20, 30 years. It was one of them. There's been, again, it wouldn't change any of it. Couldn't be proud of the girls and how the young ladies young women they've grown into. So it's all been worthwhile from that point of view. What's kept me going is just that deep connection to the land. Like I said, I couldn't wait to get home. And when you start to see it move forward and thrive and respond, it just makes you bloody excited.
That's such a nice sentiment about the girls. What do you hope that your daughters do take from growing up on Etiwanda?
Yeah, I thought about this one last night. I think that connection to land, which is so few of today's generation get the opportunity to do that. I think that's been a huge positive to them. And they've seen the highs and the lows and the droughts and the dead animals, and they know what life's about. It's not always perfect, and they've learned when things get tough, you've got to dig in and fight and come out that other side stronger. So, I think that's what they've benefited from, from being connected to the land.
And how has your definition of success changed over the years, or if it has at all?
Probably refined it. We were having a conversation with the succession facilitator the other day, and we're talking about our holistic context. And when we started to write it 30 odd years ago or 25 years ago, whatever it was, we struggled. We didn't really know what we wanted. We struggled to put words on paper. But that's evolved now that girls had input to it. It's pretty clear now, and we've got a deep understanding of our context of what's really important to us. So, families, landscape, there's other things in place too. So success is defined in terms of that context, keeping the family together, moving the landscape forward, building the business to make room for the next generation, if that's how it works out. So if we could, keep moving toward in that direction, well, I think we're doing pretty well.
And finally, what are you most looking forward to from here?
The challenge of moving it into the next phase. Like I said, Meg and I have laid the foundation. We've got a really good model that works in this environment. White Dorpers, goats, cattle, Red Angus cattle. So we want to expand that. We want to have a positive impact on more country. And then, if the girls and their partners come into it, that'll be fantastic. Bring those systems in so we can scale it and just keep improve the operation further.
Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story today. It's been fascinating to hear how Etiwanda has evolved and how you've approached both the land and the business with such thoughtfulness and persistence. I really appreciate you giving us a glimpse into the decisions, challenges, and proud moments that have shaped your journey. I'm sure listeners will come away with plenty to think about and learn from. So thanks again for being with me today.
My pleasure, Victoria. If you want to know more, we've got a website, or we're happy to talk to people that are keen to make positive changes to the landscape.
To all our listeners, thank you for joining me for the Stockyard Sessions podcast, proudly brought to you by Atlas Ag, the team behind Atlas Carbon and Atlas Grazing. To learn how you can optimise your grazing operations through better pasture health, stronger livestock performance, and increased soil carbon, visit atlasag.com.